All right, folks, you're all very welcome to tonight's special edition of Lockdown Chats. We have two very special guests in the world of animation, two Irish guys doing some really interesting things. Before we get started, I just want to thank um, our usual collaboration with June Fest in Newbridge, and thanks to Kildare County Council and Laois County Council for the RSX grants for making this podcast possible and our physical events in the Celtic Con and Comic Con world. And with that, all that stuff out of the way, I'd like to introduce the two guys here. So, Seamus, do you want to introduce yourself there, please?
Hi, David. Thanks. Yeah, I'm Seamus Malone, animator, writer, director of various things.
Very good. And Alan, do you want to introduce yourself there, please?
My name is Alan Keane, and I'm a writer, producer who does an awful lot of animation stuff, and I do some live action as well. But yeah, most of it would be in the animation world.
Very, very good. Thanks very much for that, lads. So, Seamus, you wanna just let us know about some of the projects you've worked on over the years and some of the stuff that you've got involved in, please?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I went to Ballyfermot College in Dublin in between 92 and 94, 91 and 94, I think. And from that, I did a couple of small jobs in Dublin. I was friends with the Brown Bag Films guys, and I worked on their very first production.
Was that Peg, was it?
It was Peg, yeah. There was a little bit of stop motion at the beginning and the end, and made all the models, and shot it underneath the ice building in Parliament Street and on Dean Street on the fourth floor of some place as well.
I would have worked with Keith Foran. Do you remember Keith?
I remember Keith. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Keith was one of the original guys.
Keith was one of my lecturer in college.
Oh, fantastic. In Dunleary, yeah. Well, another lecturer in Dunleary, Tony Donoghue was his name. He brought over some cameras and we shot Peg on these cameras. And he kind of told me about Bristol and Aardman, even though I already knew about them. And I got a chance to go over there and did some tests. This is like in late 96, I think. And they were getting ready to do their first feature film, which was Chicken Run. And they didn't have many animators, and they wanted to train some up. So I went over there. Initially, I thought maybe for a year or two, and ended up doing Chicken Run over 3 years there. I think got released in 2000. And then I stayed at Aardman for about 16 years from that point, and did Creature Comforts, USA, Creature Comforts 2. I'd done a bit of CG animation because Aardman were working with DreamWorks at the time. So I went over, I was on Shrek 2 for a while. And then I came back and did Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbits, Flushed Away, Art Christmas, feature films. I directed Shaun the Sheep for a couple of years, TV series. Let me see, Rex the Runt, let's say that.
I love Rex the Runt. I absolutely love it.
It was hilarious, actually. And then, yeah, later on, then I left Aardman and I co-directed Watership Down, which is a book I really liked, as a kid. And after that, then worked Ron's Gone Wrong, which trailer was released just yesterday, actually. I was on that for about 3 years. And most recently, I'm back at Aardman again, doing a TV show at the moment called Lloyd of the Flies, which is very funny. So a lot of TV commercials peppered in there as well with Aardman, CG, stop motion, even a bit of 2D, TV shows and features. So yeah, that's a quick list.
Very good. I noticed your little grommet in the background there.
Yeah. The animators gave me that actually. I think the first time I went to DreamWorks, as a reminder, to remember stop motion and fingers on things, and they all signed it. It was a scene I did in Curse of the Were Rabbit, where Gromit's looking after his marrow and feeds it and puts blanket over it and all that kind of thing and measures it. And it was a really tight set, loads of lights and cameras and everything around it, and there was barely any room for the animator. But it was a really nice sequence, and they gave me that, so I still have it.
Very good. Absolutely excellent. And yourself, Alan, do you want to tell us a few of the projects you've been involved in?
Oh, my first proper big gig was on Roy for Jam Media, which is going back probably about 13 years. And I was a script editor and a writer on that, and that was really a surprise hit. It was really I wasn't really trained as an animation writer at that point. I saw myself more as a sort of a comedy live action writer, but it was a great gig. The show did really well. It won a Royal Television Society Award and a BAFTA. And I actually, right after it finished, I was the boom kind of imploded. The Celtic Tiger died, and I was unemployed for about a year. And then I got offered a job at Aardman. So I literally weeks after getting married, I went out there and I worked on a show called Cannibals for Aardman, which is really interesting. It was like a Korean, Spanish, UK co-production, and I was a writer, script editor on that. And then the producer left about, I'd say, a third into way into production, and they just gave me the job to finish it on our end, which was really a great experience. Doing also the music and sound post production and working with all these different cultures and different um, uh, yeah, so that was really great. Then I really kind of launched me onto other things. Aardman's a great place to have in your CV. You really learn an awful lot because you're surrounded by such incredibly educated, knowledgeable, and talented people. And then I went on to do loads and loads more animation. I worked on The Amazing World of Gumball for 5 seasons and even had a character named after me, which I think is the greatest of all accolades I've had in my career. Um, I did a lot of other shows. Oddbods was probably the big success. The last one I did was nominated for 3 Emmys in a row. Didn't win any, but it was again, it was a really good career launcher. And that was all sort of non-dialogue action slapstick, again, stuff that I sort of would have learned a lot of my craft and understanding for it at Aardman. And yeah, no, it's kind of really, having all those great shows under your belt, working with really talented people. It's done my career the world of good. And I've been working on sort of animation since too. I also was responsible for, I'll admit this is more of a confession, I co-wrote the first series of Damon Ivor, which I think is Marmite to some people. So some people might not see
I
that.
actually love it. I actually really like it.
Yeah.
I remember the original sketches of Damon Ivor. Sorry, not Damon Ivor. The Damo. The
Yeah, and
Hit
Republic
Me
of
Ride. What was the
yeah.
remember the original
They did
sketches?
YouTube stuff. I think they got them onto Republic of Telly around about the same time. The Rubber Bandits were there as well. There was actually RT comedy was very interesting at the point because they were kind of investing in new talent and bringing people out of nowhere. Now those people don't really have any home to go to, but they there's plenty of talent on YouTube if you look.
No, absolutely no. I really liked it. There's what I actually love about Irish comedy is to seem to work the heart and have the kind of heart and soul behind some of the comedy. Like, Damon Ivor was actually quite good stories and it was really beautifully directed and stuff like that. They put a lot of work into it. I know was the two brothers that were helming the show, two
There's
directors.
one guy. Oh, the two brothers were. That was the second series. Now I wasn't involved in that.
Ah,
There was
right, okay.
Rob and Roland Burke, some lovely, lovely guys. Actually, they did that. Then they've done a few features since. I think they're shooting a TV series over here for one of the big streamers at the moment. So they've gone on to other things.
Very good. So they all launched all your careers and all that. Um, but yeah, back to yourself, Seamus. Do you wanna tell us some of the roles in animation? Like you started in Chicken Run, so what would have been your role there, and just tell us how you progressed through into directing animation. You want to tell us the different bits and pieces?
Sure. I was an animator on Chicken Run, or key animator, as they would call it, which is the same as maybe, you know, a lead animator or something like that. Um, Purely because there wasn't a lot of us. It was quite a small crew made Chicken Run, and we did grow, and we started off doing a lot of testing because we didn't. Aardman had never made a feature film before, so we kind of made it up as we went along, in a lot of ways in different departments. But it came down to, you know, having these audio tracks and that we were animating to. And as an animator on that first show, I mean, we all learned a lot, as Alan was saying there a minute ago, from each department was learning off each other. I mean, it was really when the film was over, we kind of said, now we can make a film, because we had to make all the mistakes on this one. And I would be on a shot, say, with Ginger and Rocky, you know, the two main characters. It might be, you know, 5 or 6 second shot of them talking, but I might be on that for a week. I'd be shooting about 2 seconds a day. And
Want to explain the process of stop motion there, just for some people that might not actually realize?
Well, stop motion is created by having a puppet in front of the camera and take a photograph. And this one photograph is kind of followed by the next photograph, and you will move your puppet just a small bit and take another photograph. And you do that 24 times. It's almost like the character's walking in slow motion. You imagine it in slow motion. And for every position, you will click 1 frame or maybe 2 frames, double frames. And you play back those 24 frames, and there's a second of animation of the character going along. So it's all shot straight ahead. You start at frame 1 and you finish at frame 125 or something like that if it's a 5-second shot. Whereas computer animation is all kind of done at the same time. But this is straight ahead. It's called stop motion. They're real puppets, real sets, real lights, and real cameras. So there's a physical presence to it all. And you sculpt it as you're animating it. And yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but it's like painting a picture or something like that. You could spend half an hour on 1 frame, 1 position, just getting it all right. And the time goes so fast when you're doing it because you're concentrating on it. And before you know it, the whole day is like 8 hours later, and there's no windows in any stop motion studio because, you know, there's no reference to the outside world really. You know, Monday morning at 9 o'clock is the same as Friday evening at 6. So you might have a shot then that is your 5 or 6 seconds long. You might do 2 seconds of that a day. You know, the character's halfway across the screen. You're animating arms, legs, shoulders, torso, head, mouth, eyes, all at the same time. And then at the end of 5 or 6 days, your shot is finished. We used to shoot on film, but it's all shot on video stills now. And when it was shot on film, that was it. It was literally in the can. And you would get it processed, and the next morning you'd look at it on the Steenbeck machine, the editing machine, or on a bigger screen. And you're hard to be in your mouth because it's like, you know, when you get your photographs developed, are they going to come out right? Did I accidentally forget to take a frame? Did the light go out? You know, lots of things like that. It was very nerve-wracking. But that's how we did it. And each sequence of the movie was broken down into, you know, 100 shots or something. And they would give an animator 10 shots in a row. And that's your bit. And you might be on those 10 shots for a month. You shoot the whole sequence. You have responsibility for it. And then you might get put on another sequence, you know, with different characters. Of course, Ginger and Rocky were the main characters. So we had multiples of Ginger and Rocky, so we could use them on different sets simultaneously. So yeah, it's all very much handcrafted. And that was my experience of Chicken Run, you know, starting in the morning, frame 1. Maybe you're at frame 50 by the end of the evening. Sometimes you might go later. If you're nearly finished a shot, it's as well finished a shot because all the lights go down at nighttime.
Yeah.
And then next morning, lights come up again. But wood, and everything kind of shrinks during the night, contracts, and the next morning you look at your previous frame of your live image and they don't match. There's a big
I,
discrepancy.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say that, like, how do you get that? Even like lighting, match lighting. I know you can't just turn these things on. They have to heat up for half an hour and all this sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. The electricians would have to come in an hour before the animators to kind of turn up the lights and warm up the set, check for a set shift, we call it. So even the big tables with the sets on them would sag in the middle a little bit. So we used to have to go under with like jacks and like jack them up just a little bit, just by a couple of millimeters.
Yeah.
Up a bit, no, down a bit. Oh, stop there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, right there. And there was a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that you'd never really know about, but that's the kind of nature of stop motion, that we shot it in a big warehouse and it wasn't really climate controlled or anything. And so it would get cold at night and things would break and it'd warm up in the morning. And then in the summer, it would be too hot.
Yeah, just all these things people don't realize, especially working in film, how I just imagine the stress level of
Yeah, I
working on
mean, there
stuff
was
like that.
a lot of that, because a lot of chicken runs at nighttime. So your camera would have quite a long shutter speed sometimes. So it might be a 2 second or a 4 second exposure. And if you've got any chicken on a wire that's like moving, you have to wait till it's steady. Otherwise, it'd be a blur on the frame unless you wanted a blur. Um, so, we'd be talking to the director of photography and they'd be saying, okay, we'll go at F11 at a 4 second exposure. And we'd be like, oh, can we not get, F5 on a 2 second exposure because it'll be quicker for us. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, you can't do that. Um,
And what was the kind of physical constraints of actually you guys? Like, I know stop motion sets, just some of them are like opening trapdoors and climbing over, and is there
yeah.
any craziness like that?
Well, yeah, it is a little bit. It's a bit like practicing yoga while animating, because you've got your set and you've all these light stands everywhere and you have to maneuver yourself in and get your hands on the puppet and be able to animate it and maneuver yourself out without hitting anything. And everything is stuck down. I mean, stands that are holding lights are glued to the floor. And then we glue little L-shaped pieces of wood called kick guards. So you'll kick the wood before you'll kick the stand. Cameras are glued down with sandbags. Absolutely everything that can move is locked down and stuck down to kind of minimize accidents. At the same time, we did have trapdoors and pulleys and people having to get on the set and trying to move one thing without moving anything else. It's like being surrounded by dominoes or something.
So if you were doing a crowd scene now, would it be multiple animators at the same time, or was it just one person?
Yeah, you would try and do as much as you could within your arm's reach, really. But if there was characters at the back of the set, I mean, it might take you a minute to walk around there, and that's quite a long time. So you might have an animator over there, and they'd be looking after their part of it, and they might even have a separate camera just to check their animation. And same on the other side. I mean, the very last shot of Chicken Run of Rocky and Ginger going down the hill was my shot, and I was doing Rocky and Ginger, but there was all these characters in the background that was done by 3 assistant animators, and they all had to come onto the set, and the same way every time, come on, come off. And in the middle of that shot, there was actually a power cut, and everything just went black while they were standing on the set. I was like, "Don't move! Whatever you do, don't move! Don't step in the And it
So how,
took us
so how did you
half an
start?
hour.
Half an hour to get it back, and then just
Half an hour to get the power back, and then there was a Milo camera, which is a big camera on an arm, and of course that just zeroed out, and we had to kind of get it back because it was a camera move as well.
yeah.
It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes in stop motion, something will happen.
I know. So
There's so many shots. Yeah.
sorry, Alan, I didn't want to talk over you there.
No.
No, just those big cameras. I know there's some kind of computerization of them and whatever, but like must be fairly primitive back 2000 even, was it? Technology wise, computer control wise.
Yeah, they were like they're about the size of a small car. The Milo cameras, and we had 3 of them on Chicken Run. I think they were like, I don't know, £250,000 or something each. But we were able to do, pretty decent pans, and of course we'd always, check them out first. And with a stop motion set, you're sort of limited. I mean, you can't do a 360 pan. You've only really shooting what's in front of you, like a stage. So if you go off too much, you're going to go off the edge of the set, and you'll see the wall behind, which breaks the illusion. But at the same time, we had to plan everything out carefully and do tests, and we were able to do kind of trucks, pans, and zooms on this camera, program it all in, and then the camera would move frame by frame. Every time you pressed the button to take a frame, the camera would advance one position as well. Just a lot of planning, like a lot of animation. There's a lot of planning.
Yeah. That's
that
just
kind of
crazy.
planning, though, really gives great cinema, because it forces you to really think about how you use your shots and how much you can pack into it, and it
Absolutely.
makes incredible. I mean, those are incredible cinematic experiences.
Yeah, we were when we started seeing shots coming back from the Milo cameras, then we actually felt we were making a feature. Then we really kind of went, oh my god, this is kind of cool.
And just about yourself, Alan. So what kind of different roles, and you're a writer and everything, but there's still even switching genres, even from live action to animation, and even within live action there's different genres, and within animation there's different genres. So how do you kind of work that, or do you think much about the process, or is it?
I suppose, I mean, as a writer, you invariably end up being kind of pigeonholed in some way or another. So if you've had success in one particular genre, then you're more likely to get looked at and pursued by people who want similar things tonally, or so I've really specialized by and large in comedy, which I've always wanted to. I've been very lucky. It's I did a screenwriting master's. I went and did a course in UCLA, another sort of professional screenwriting master's there as a scholarship as part of my master's degree, and I got a job offered in the States as a writer's assistant on a TV show, actually a live action TV show. But this is around about the time that the whole industry kind of started to implode, when cheaper reality TV sort of started to come to the fore. So I was all ready to move back and start the job, and it was pulled. So I was kind of very disappointed at that point. I was hoping to go in sort of live in the States, go in the writers' room and work my way up to being sort of a live action writer. So when the animation presented itself, I really enjoyed it. I always loved animation as a kid. I just hadn't really sort of seriously considered it until then. But I'm really glad I have, because it's a less toxic, I think, environment than a lot of the live action. Live action can be very competitive. You have to be humbled by the amount of people you work with in animation who are just alarmingly, like astonishingly, breathtakingly talented, because it requires, you'll identify the weak link in animation very, very quickly. So I mean, I've really just specialized in writing and script editing and story editing. I've done some producing, which I really enjoy. So it's, when you take a step back and you let other people write and you give notes and you collaborate, and I like the approach of sort of being an open-minded and collaborative storyteller, because ultimately stories are for audiences, and you always have to take notes and listen to people about what may or may not be working in your stories. So yeah, I mean, I'm that's the long and the short of it, is that I've worked across an awful lot of things. I'm really happy working predominantly now in animation, and I have a live action feature which I'm producing, hopefully, which we'll be shooting next year as well. So I'm trying to keep a finger in as many pies as possible. In a business like this, you kind of have to be sort of flexible and open-minded, and to work on different things and to try different roles. But as a writer in animation, you hand over that at some point to a director, and then you let them sort of do their job from there, and you just hope it looks like what you intend it to, or if it doesn't, it looks better.
So what kind of person were you? What kind of things were you writing in secondary school, or how did you go? Like, I want to go work in film, or I want to work in. Did you think about you wanted to work in animation, or did you want to work in film, or what was the goal back in?
I wanted to work in film initially. It would have been sort of after I left. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at college. I was an absolute film fanatic. I just didn't know how to get in or to even get started. So I did a psychology degree, and then I sort of temped for a few years trying to get working for free on short films, being ruthlessly exploited for a long time until I kind of figured out how to break in. And it was when yeah, I mean, I was always sort of writing and doing comic strips and that sort of thing. And I was not a great artist, but I enjoyed myself doing it. Yeah, I ended up sort of applying for screenwriting masters with some samples, and I done a lot of reading of scripts, which I think is really important if you want to write. Read scripts, read good scripts, read bad scripts. You'd be surprised you probably learn more from bad scripts than you do good scripts. Or good scripts are like, it's the ethereal greatness of it all, but it's in bad scripts you can learn bad habits and bad things, and you know, let someone else make the mistakes for you.
Very good. And back to yourself, Seamus. So you explained the stop motion thing there and your animation and Chicken Run, but like how did you do that? Go from stop motion working with puppets to doing CGI? I imagine that'd be a massive jump, would it? Or was all the skills there, or how did it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it purely from an acting point of view, you know, you want to get the same performance out no matter what the medium is, where it's 2D or live action, CG or stop motion. And yeah, it's a different set of tools. And I kind of went back and forward CG stop motion throughout the years. And I kind of picked up, you know, little tips and things from one medium to another. Although it used to take my brain about 2 days to completely readjust to like in stop motion, gravity is real, for instance. You know, if you drop something, it's going to fall. And I guess when DreamWorks kind of sponsored the Chicken Run, and we were going to do a couple of movies with DreamWorks, we were going to do 5. I'd ended up about 3. And when we finished Chicken Run, we started another film which never really saw the light of day, Tortoise and the Hare. And we were in a quiet period, and I decided they wanted to kind of raise the bar a bit on the acting side of CG after the first Shrek movie, you know, which was technologically really kind of advanced, but animation wise, it was a bit stiff and a bit wooden in places from an acting point of view. So me and another animator went over there for a while, and we started working on Shrek 2 testing and started to get the ball rolling on the second one. And I just kind of picked it up bit by bit. I never had any sort of formal CG training, but just by sitting with the animators there, a lot of them were like ex-Disney guys who had done a lot of 2D, and that sort of lent itself quite well to 3D for composition and all that. And coming from stop motion, you maybe have more of an awareness of 3D space, you know, from working with real puppets and real things. So there was kind of 2D animators and stop motion animators came together on Shrek 2 to kind of give it more kind of cinematic feel and better acting as well.
Definitely better performance, yeah.
Yeah, and what I mean about acting is that animators are sort of like actors themselves, and you have to know performance, learn it almost, and when you can act it out yourself, then you can translate that into a puppet, into a figure or something like that. You're not just moving it around for, you know, mechanically. There's kind of a bit of heart and soul or something inside it. You know, you've probably seen old tests where someone animates a sack, but it's got emotion and it's got a sort of feeling, and that's the skill of the animator, whether it is CG or stop motion. But I used to love going into it, and then I'd come back, and yeah, it would take me a couple of days for all the gears to go from vertical to horizontal in my head. Yeah, it was kind of a strange kind of thing. But I think CG features was sort of in its infancy back then, and now there's loads of them. But it was a good time to be, you know, with CG animators. Toy Story had just come out a couple of years before, and Shrek had just won the first Oscar, which just came into existence after Chicken Run. But yeah, I would say the feeling and the acting is the same no matter what the medium.
It's quite remarkable for me to watch, particularly sort of like stop motion and animation performance that are so full of life and soul and personality, and to know that you've done that literally 2 clicks at a time.
Yeah,
It's to get that fluidity and that continuity. Uh,
mm,
yeah, it just blows my mind. And honestly, like you're as important as actors, but never really quite as well recognized or regarded for the work.
no, and most animators kind of don't mind that.
Yeah, a lot of them are introverts, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But
Mm.
you still have to know it, and yeah, a lot of animators do act stuff out again and again and again and again, record themselves,
Yeah.
and it's not copying it really. It's more like a reference. That's all it is. You know, there's a moment there, and you might act something out with the director, like Nick Park or someone, and we'd watch it back. We'd act it out 3 or 4 times, and oh, I like that moment there when you go, "Ooh, cheese" or something. Yeah. And he said, "Oh, and this bit here from take 5." So, oh yeah. So you get the idea in your head. There's a moment there he likes, and there's a moment there. And I'm not going to copy it. I just want to capture that moment. If it's in timing or it's a hold, because animation's a lot about delivery and timing and
I was just
you
going to
know,
say that, especially in stop motion, like it's so precise and you have to get from here to here. And like, I don't know how you guys do it. I know in animation you can, or sorry, in computer stuff, you can kind of relay, and even 2D, you can kind of teams can kind of work this stuff out. But stop motion, you're on your own. You know what I mean? Like you said,
yeah, that's it's straight ahead animation. I mean, you sort of I used to always think about 10 frames ahead where I was, you know, so like, oh, okay, in 10 frames time I'll be there. And 4 frames later, I'm still thinking 10 frames ahead. Okay, I'm going to be there. And you're not sure if it's going to work. So there's a bit of an energy in it that if it does work, you go, oh God, thank God for that. And if it doesn't work, you may have to do it again. But there is a certain kind of energy in stop motion that's hard to replicate in CG.
isn't much of it that doesn't make it. Like I know, like in computer animation, you can run off reels and there's loads of pre-test
Yeah,
and stuff, but like stop motion, it must be pretty tight. There's probably not that much to put out of it, is there?
not really, no. I do remember at the beginning of Chicken Run, we had a 50% reshoot rate, but everyone was learning, you know, from the directors down to the model makers, and everyone was kind of figuring out how to get it done. And then production were like, you know, come on, lads, we have to finish the film soon. You better start proving more things. Unless there's something really unfortunate happens, you may have to cut back or reshoot. Uh, there's always a couple of shots. You might go 10 shots and absolutely approvals each time, and then suddenly you get one shot where the director is either not quite getting it, so you'll do it again, and maybe it's not quite there yet, and maybe even a third time. Sometimes they might go with take one, but you might have to kind of find an awkward shot every now and then. But because of the time it takes, you know, and if you're doing a week on every shot, not a lot gets left on the cutting room floor, but it does happen sometimes.
I'd imagine as well, you kind of said it there as well about the 50% kind of drop off of at the start of production, but I'd imagine that gets a little bit easier. But even, yeah, I can imagine there's a learning process to go through it all. And
Yeah, I felt like I'd done my best shots with a month or so to go at the end of Chicken Run, and I think everyone felt that as well. But the bar was being raised all the time. You know, at the beginning, someone would do like a really nice shot, and we'd all look at it together and, oh, that's really good. And you'd want to kind of better that almost. And then someone else would do a shot. Oh man, that's really good as well. Every time I do that character, I'm going to look at that. And the bar kept kind of going and going. And then it felt like we got there towards the end, you know, a couple of months to go, and everybody was doing really good stuff at that stage because we were used to the characters, we were getting better at it, and yeah.
so how often would you be seeing other people's stuff? Would you sit down, watch it weekly or monthly or every now and again?
Yeah, well, sometimes daily. You know, there is dailies, and anyone that's finished a shot the night before will probably show it the next morning. And you know, you'd welcome all animators to come in and look, so they can see, you know, what the reaction the director would give and if he likes it or not. And also, you might be in the middle of a shot and you might have a bit of trouble, and you might just go for advice for an animator next door, or you know, camera person or whoever, and you'd show them your shot and they'd say, oh, that's looking good, maybe this feels a little funny here. And So we'd look at each other's shots the whole time. And also, if I was on a long shot, like a 2-week shot, I'd make sure the director would come down every 2 days or so just to check progress, especially in stop motion.
There's no such thing. I know digitally you could probably do that stuff whenever he's around, and you're saying there's different teams. Was there 3 different crews all the time on Chicken Run?
Yeah, there was. I mean, Chicken Run was kind of split up in two, really. We had Nick Park and Pete Lord directing. So I'll be on Nick's team for a while and then maybe Pete's team for a while. And each set would have, model makers, electricians, set dressers, all in your shot. But we would swap around quite a lot too. I guess I said the one main team, but it was sort of split down the middle a little bit.
Very good. And how much of a crew would be there on each shot, or would the time be there at the start, set up the shot, and then you're kind of left on your own? Like obviously, you need a camera person there all the time. I presume. I presume that's not your responsibility.
No, actually, if it was a moving camera like the Milos we spoke about earlier, there has to be an operator for safety reasons in case it tries to, hit you or go crazy. Otherwise, the set would be set up by the carpenters. It would be dressed by the set dressers. The electricians would come in and light it with the director of photography. They'd get all their settings and all the gels and the lights. Director would come in and brief you. You might act out the shot. There's a big black curtain all around the set, so nobody can distract you or no extra light can get in. Then you kind of get boarded, which is like the old snapper, clapperboard thing, except it's just a piece of paper, which is film, and you're on your own for a week or 2 weeks or something like that, and that is an animator's life in stop motion. Anyway, a lot of the time you're just there on your own, thinking about your performance. I used to spend the longest time on the first frame because once you start that puppet, you're on a path. You're going somewhere with it. So you can't sort of go, I'll see this way, see how it happens. No. You have to really plan it out and know where you're going to be on frame 20, 50, 100, 200 with every character. So yeah, it's and those 2 weeks can go by very quickly, or if it's not going well, very slowly.
And just about yourself, Alan. So what? I know you've kind of created TV shows and stuff as well. So you want to tell people about creating the Bible for animation show, or what would the various stages are coming?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking sort of for commissioning money by broadcasters or finance, you kind of have to have a Bible, which is kind of a funny name for something. It's a made up fictional thing, where you kind of set out the rules of the world and the characters are in it. What's the show about? What are the themes that you're going to explore? I mean, you might have a fairly good idea of what the story's about, but at the same time, as you start to kind of dive deeper, once you get finance, you start writing it. That often kind of it might slightly change. But it's a great way of trying to distill for time poor people like executives who hate reading, and I don't blame them, because a lot of the stuff you would read wouldn't always be great. And it's reading for work, it's not reading for joy. So you kind of have to develop something nice and short. Like you can even down to like a 2-page is a good way to start. You distill your idea into something really simple that you can pitch, because ultimately they're going to have to. That's how they're going to sell it to viewers and consumers. So high concept stuff sells very well because you can pitch it in a couple of lines or in a couple of paragraphs. Stuff that, should we say, more nuanced and subtle. If there's no kind of major kind of dramatic or unique things in it, they're much harder to sell, even though they could be equally as valid and interesting a story. And from that Bible, then you use all that information to go, right, I'm going to have a stab at writing the script, and that's really quite hard, because you're literally setting the tone of the world. It's when it first starts to come into existence. And it's recommended normally that you have at least one episode written, or if it's an 11-minute show, I'd say write 2 or 3 even, to show the people that essentially this is how it works, this is what it reads like, this is the tone and the energy of the writing. And hopefully give you a bit of a clue as to what the show is going to look like, because that's really what a script is. It's not the finished product. It's a blueprint in which lots of other talented, imaginative people with real areas of expertise will hopefully come in identify what needs to be done and elevate it and add their talent to it, you know.
So would
Uh,
you just create stuff on the Word on the document, or would you actually work with the studio, or would you work with people, or does it change
Well, it depends.
project to
Sometimes
project?
people would come to me with, you know, an idea that isn't really quite very well formed. I mean, at the moment, I'm working on a TV show where, yeah, it wasn't really the best idea. They had a really, it's a thing set in the future, and I essentially had to kind of say, right, I had to fix it. And I said, well, you know, so I had to kind of come up with a high concept premise to turn this show into something that, you know, is a story engine. So you know that you could literally sit down and you can think of loads and loads of ideas, because that's what you want. I mean, ultimately, broadcasters want to invest in a property that they can say, you know, can run for, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 plus seasons if it's a success. And if you know, you don't want to run out of road, so you kind of want to just create a world in the universe that has a renewability to it, or a, you know, as we say in the business, has it got any legs? Kind of keep on running for you. Um,
So so
and
what
you know, not everything lends it. Like for features, sometimes features are just there. I mean, like most of the business wants to know the sequel potential so they can exploit the success of the first one. But not all stories have to continue. Some stories just end the way they end. But in
so
my line of work, more often than not, it's like create something that we can exploit. It's the nature of the game.
so would you have a you'd have your script and you have just say this brand new animation show, like what stage would you give that to character designers or
Oh,
studio, or would
uh,
you
well,
would
earlier on,
you
I'd work with the producers, possibly the producers and director, and you know, we do various, you know, drafts of things, whether it's the Bible, when you get notes and feedback, or you know, at every stage you're collaborating with people, because ultimately you have to. Everyone has to have the shared vision. There's no point in us all having 3 different ideas of what the show is in its head and then going out and executing and finding out it doesn't really work. I mean, you all have to have, you know, the process of development is getting everyone to the point where we go, okay, I can see the show now. I can imagine it. I can see how it works. I know what the tone is. And then at that point, when that's all locked, you then give it to designers. And, you know, again, you have to allow people to add a layer to it. You know, you have to allow people to add value. When it works really well, you know, what you see is better than anything that you've ever written, because it has all these extra bells and whistles you couldn't have even imagined. And that's when it works really, really well, you know. When it doesn't work well is when sort of key elements that might seem really small or insignificant are lost, or they're not communicated, or the audience aren't reading them. And all of a sudden, a really logical, clearly well thought out story with, you know, twists and turns and revelations, just you know, you lose an audience early on. It just becomes a confusing mess, and that can happen too. You know, it can happen when there's that many people involved. All it takes is 1 or 2 rogue and non-functioning elements and poor communication, or whatever the reason is. Whether, you know, and there's a million different reasons. I mean, I'm not putting blame. I'm just saying that sometimes things don't work. But it really, a good production requires really good leadership, incredible communication. And I find the ones with the best morale, that's really where you get the best work. I know some people say, you know, troublesome shoots can lead to exquisite work. I don't believe that. I think they're fooling themselves. You know, it's a great job when it's going well and you're working with people who all have a mutual respect for each other and listen to each other. It's a tough job when, you know, we can't agree on things. And you know, this is the writing business in particular. There's a lot of rejection in it. There is a lot of it's not for the faint of heart. You know, it really is
so,
for foolish dreamers who you know, are optimistic in their bias. Because it's tough. It's tough out there. I feel very privileged and blessed that it's kind of worked out so well for me, because I do think that luck plays an awful lot of a big role, I think, in having a good creative career.
so as a writer, if you're working on an animation show, like how closely would you work? Would you sit with the directors? Would you sit with the storyboard artists, or would you just let all those people do their
Well,
thing? Or
for me, I like to let people do their thing. I mean, but early on, initially, as you're kind of knitting the show together, the various constituent elements that everyone brings, I think it works really well when everyone starts to talk to each other and feeds back into the process ultimately. But as a writer, there comes a point when you have to step away and you say, well, it's somebody else's job to go and direct that and realize that. And that's a very different skill, and they're not necessarily, one doesn't necessarily lend it to the other, even though, you know, lots of people who write think they can direct, and lots of people are directing they can write. It's not always that, you know, those talents quite embody themselves. I mean, I've known some fantastic directors who aren't writers but give you the most incredible story notes and have a really good instinct for story. And those are the kind of people you love working with, because ultimately they're going to give you notes that make your work better. If you're precious and it's like, well, it's my work or my way, then you're going to find yourself hitting walls very early on in your career. You have to be open to a good idea, no matter where it comes from. And sometimes you just have to be smart enough to figure out how to make the note work. Even if you're not convinced by it, you have to make it work on some level for you, you know?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point. I made a short film myself, and just we were coming at it different levels and different people. So how would you strike the balance between, if you felt something was really not working, like how would you go, right lads?
With great delicacy, but with absolute urgency. It needs to be done. You know, you're turning a blind eye is always a bad mistake. It really is. You know, and you have to just have a way of, again, of communication. Can you give someone a note that you know they might not like? Because if they continue to execute or do things in a particular way, then you know it's not going to work. You know, and small things can ruin great things. Like, all it takes is one thing that breaks the contract of suspension of disbelief between the audience and filmmakers. You know, that's broken. You've kind of lost your audience a little bit, and you have to work very hard to get them back. You know, and lots of people, I know I'm one of those. I suppose I've been at this so long, and it's hard to sit down and watch something without thinking about the 50 elements, you know, because you really do appreciate the craft that goes into it. Whereas I suppose I miss that, you know, because you can know too much. You know, the days of going into a cinema and just completely getting lost in something like a child are rarer. I mean, you do watch some things that are so astonishing that you just forget. You know, you don't see the edges of the screen anymore. You're literally transported somewhere else. But when you know what we know, you know, yeah, any tiny little element that isn't quite working, and all of a sudden it becomes an exercise in working out how things are made, and you can still appreciate it, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
So just yourself, Seamus. So you're talking about animation and moving from stop motion to CGI, but do you want to just explain a bit about maybe going from an animator to not assistant animator, but maybe like supervising animator or something like that, or what the difference would be, or up to directing, or what the process is, or the zigzagging of how you get there?
Yeah. Well, kind of like what Alan was saying, it is a very collaborative process. And after animating for a couple of years, you just sort of, you get used to your characters, and you know your characters, and maybe you can explain how they work to other people. So you find yourself with maybe 10 animators who come on board, and you will kind of, you know, just kind of guide them for the first couple of shots, um, making sure that they know the quirks and foibles of certain characters, little golden rules, what to do, what not to do. And someone with an overview, like a director or supervising director or animator, kind of has this overview and can kind of, you know, spread it around to other people and keep an eye on the whole sequence or the whole movie. Whereas animators, you know, you'd be just concentrating on your shot. But the supervisor knows that in 10 shots time, there's a joke or a gag or a reveal or some kind of payoff. And the animator says, oh, what if I do this and I make this really funny? And you kind of have to say, no, that's a really good idea, but we're going to save that for this payoff 10 shots ahead, something like that. So the supervisor has to know kind of, you know, the whole sequence, where it peaks and troughs, and where to put in the emotion, and where to save it. You can't have every shot singing and dancing, because even though you'd love to do that, it's tiresome after a while.
Neither too much reverence for everything. There's no reverence.
Yeah. So you have to strike that balance, and you know, even the writing thing that Alan was talking about. If there's something not working, you have to recognize that and say, I need help here, everybody. What do you think about this? And you have to be prepared to let things go or cut things out of your story. You know, to say, is that really important? Is it more important or less important than something else happening? And the supervising animator director has to sort of know these things. And then you put your trust in your animators. Then I would always do the same thing. I love it when someone has a better idea than me, because it makes the show better, you know. And you go, this is what I think. What do you think? Oh, what about this? What about that? Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's animate that there. Sometimes bits of magic can happen like that.
It's in the
Um,
exchange of these things that, a better idea could even lead to a better idea. It's this idea that people,
yeah.
like you're saying, when you're working on those shots and you watch these
Mm.
incredible shots, that all of a sudden you could start to see the film.
Yeah.
And then you basically inject that sort of level of ambition
Yeah.
because you've seen it and you know it's something that, through concentration, discipline, and
Mm.
talent, that you can push your stuff to that level.
It's very inspiring actually when that happens, that you can kind of go, God, I never would have thought of that in a million years. And it's such a nice little thing to do with your character, your acting, or something like that. So I started directing Shaun the Sheep, after a couple of years at Aardman, and they were like, we would do one episode, but I was working on maybe 7 episodes at the same time. So because it's all shot, you'd shoot all your sort of daylight shots or night shots on a particular set, and there might be 10 episodes that need a night shot. So you would have thousands of shots in your head. And you just know all the kind of main points, and I would put my trust in the animators to say, okay, I'm giving you a string of 10 shots here, and every shot would have the red dot, to call it sometimes, the moment. As long as there's a moment there with Shaun the sheep who recognizes something, as long as we get that moment, that's what I'm looking for. The rest is yours. And they would say, oh, okay, so that's the most important thing to get out of the shot, is this moment with Shaun. And that might be the most important shot of 10 shots, but you'd sort of let that be known, but you'd make sure that the animator does every shot well. But there's a couple of important shots that you want to really make shine for timing and get the laugh out. And that's kind of the skill of the supervising animator. You're also animating yourself. If you get a couple of shots, you set the style. Each character should be different, like the old limp and an eye patch thing. Each character has something that's got take, one, he always looks one way. And I used to have this sheep on Shaun the Sheep. I used to call him one shot behind sheep. And I'd always have it react to something that happened 2 shots before. Nobody ever noticed it really, but it's a thing I used to draw in the storyboards, and we brought it true into the shoot. So every character would have its own special time to shine, and the supervisor or lead animator and director kind of has to keep that overview. I guess that's the difference between supervising and animating, and that animator would know the shot better than anyone. The shot that they're on, they would do that. And you've got the overview as a supervisor or director.
And back to yourself there, Alan, just about producing. So you got thrown into the deep end there head first with cement blocks there on one of your TV shows. But like, how did you transition to it, and how did you make it work? Or
Well, I think I got the job because I knew the show probably better than anyone who's working there at that time, and I had sort of produced short films prior to that. I wasn't kind of alien to it. I really enjoy producing. So it was great fun. It was like I really learned an awful. We did the sound and music post production, and you learn how much actually sound and music can really help with storytelling, and sometimes can save you with storytelling. So it was really interesting. I when I'm trying to put together actually some productions over here in Ireland, producing, bringing sort of development, writing, sound and music post, and possibly some jazz in other studios. So I'm trying to kind of get our own IPs off the ground here in Ireland. Obviously with international co-producers, I've got a show with a Canadian company at the moment. I have another one with a Malaysian. It's doing a stop motion kind of TV show about fridge magnets that come to life. It's very much in the Aardman vein. And we actually have Golly from Aardman consulting as well. Yeah, he's going to be directing the first couple of episodes.
Oh, Golly's great.
So plenty of fingers and plenty of pies. That's, I suppose, I've always, as a freelancing writer, you always have these peaks and troughs where sometimes you're very, very busy, and other times you're like, oh my God, where's the work coming from? I've always been one of these people that tries to preoccupy myself so I'm not waiting mentally and psychologically, because that can wear you down. So I've just tried to keep myself as busy as possible. I love working and collaborating with people, and that, I suppose, that lends itself to opportunity. This Fish Magnet show, actually, which we're hoping to begin production at the end of the year, that actually fell apart because of COVID. The Malaysian broadcaster who had financed a huge chunk of it just pulled out. They were able to sort of do a force majeure because obviously they were worried about the economic fallout of it. So they shut every single thing that they had down. So when that fell apart, I was like, well, we should make this. And how do we make this? I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And what you do is just find people who can help you make it. Find people of clout and talent and reputation. You know, if it's a good idea and you've got enough determination. I mean, I think a lot of the time in this business, not only do people invest in the idea, they really invest in the person. You know, and the tenacity of people, because animation is not for the impatient or the faint of heart. It is not for the poorly disciplined. You know, it takes a special kind of mindset, I think, because it takes so long. You know, it's getting
Takes
fast still.
takes so long, and just on that point as well, like how much of it is like juicing is actually getting the funding together, or are you involved
It
with
is a
that
lot
level
of
of
that.
stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of networking. There's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of sort of developing relationships with people. You know, because ultimately, you know, we're talking about very large sums of money, and you know, you need to be able to reassure the people with that money that you've got the right team on board. You know, so yeah, no, it's great. I like what I like about producing is I feel like I'm in some ways kind of taking control of my own destiny to a degree, rather than waiting for people to show up and say, "Hey, do you fancy doing this?" And the answer could be, "Hell yeah," or "Oh, God, do I have to?" You know, what's the alternative? And it's great that I don't really feel I'm in that position anymore. And I think that a lot of it's down to the fact that, yeah, you know, producing is about, you know, it's seizing control of your own destiny to a degree if you have the bandwidth and the personality for it, and just finding brilliant people to work with, and getting their
Yeah.
enthusiasm and talent, and these things then take a momentum of their own. You know.
It is. I think it takes a special skill to kind of manage people like that as well, and
No,
keep
you do.
everyone.
You have to like people. You also have to.
Yeah,
There's different kinds of producers, but I would be someone. I'd be a fan of talent, and I'd be a fan of people, and I'd be a. You'd have to be a fan of the thing you're doing, because,
of
you know, it
course.
take you years to get across the line, and yeah, you have to be in love with it.
Mm, mm.
And if you're not, then, you know, the time can drag. The time can drag.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
So just on that, Seamus, so you co-directed Watership Down, or the remake of Watership Down, and
Yeah.
you're saying there you're a fan of the book. So do you want to tell us a bit the process behind that and where about you come on board, please?
Yeah, it was, I kind of got a call out of the blue, really. And it was actually going to be made in Ireland with Brown Bag. It did start there. Um, the director of the show had never done animation before, so wasn't really kind of aware of the whole process. And it is actually quite hard to explain animation to people who've not done it before, because it takes so long and you don't get instant results. Um, and I got a call from the producer Cecil Kramer, DreamWorks, who I'd worked with before on a few projects. And she asked me if I'd come for a meeting, and I said okay, because, you know, it's Watership Down, and I said okay, we'll do it. But
So
they,
what did we just want to say? It's a classic. Don't go
yeah,
there.
yeah, it was. We didn't have the best budget in the world for it, and it was 200 minutes long. That's
Okay.
like 2.5 feature films. And they wanted it all done in a year, or they wanted it done by Christmas that year. And straight away I said, there's no way you're going to get this done. And Netflix were behind it, and they gave us a bit more budget and a bit more time until the next year. And we actually split it into 4 kind of sections, like the book is. And we made it like that. It was a mammoth project. I mean, we had so little time to do it, and the budget was very small from, you know, the whole thing. But we kind of got it done in the end. It wasn't easy, I have to say. It was a hard job to do. We had to do most of the animation in Mumbai in India. So I would go out there for a month, and then I'd come back to London to do voices and records and all this kind of stuff. And then go back out there for another month to look after the animation and the layout and the cameras and all that sort of thing. It was a little bit rushed, I would say, just because there was so much animation to do. But every now and then, something like, you know, Watership Down comes up, and you can't really say no to it. I was really lucky to kind of be able to work on things I really wanted to work on. And like Alan said, you have to kind of love a project, and kind of, take it forward. So I didn't want to turn it down, and it was a book I've read a few times, and everyone knows about the original version being a bit kind of psychedelic almost. It's really sad. But we wanted to keep this more in line with the book. I mean, we really sort of stuck closely to the book this time. And yeah, it was it we finished it. I wish we had more time on it, but we got it done. It was nominated for 6 Emmys. We won one. But it was a fantastic job, something different as well. I love to kind of find something different, something that takes your interest, your spark, and you kind of go, oh yeah, that might be interesting. How are we going to do that? And you go down that road, and it can be bumpy, but we got there in the end.
So back to yourself, Alan. So you mentioned earlier on there's a character named after you or part of you. So how did that happen in the
Um,
Amazing World of Gumball?
I didn't realize it at the time. It was the balloon, the green balloon called Alan. There was one episode in particular where I think they had to hit an unscrew. He basically goes crazy or something. So obviously it was inspired by me. he takes he's an evil plan for the town, and then it sort of has the name up, and I realized that they'd actually named the character after me. But Ben did that, the creator. He did that with a lot of the crew he worked with there. He did like Tobias is another real person. And a
Yeah.
lot of the voices you get, some of the more peripheral ones would be people in the studio. Yeah, and so some of the more kind of zany stuff, like the upside down head shin people, they were people in the studio, and it was just a brilliantly made show. I mean, like the level of creativity that went into that show still astounds me. It's one of those things where you'd be working on stories and scripts and jokes in the writers' room. And you'd just be blown away by what you'd see at the end of it, how they'd elevate it, they'd make you look better. And that's a great thing. Like some people are like, oh, it's not my work. I'm going to just take the credit. You're part of something fantastic. Feel privileged. It's wonderfully exciting to see that, where there's so many ways that things can go wrong. And I do think more often than not, things are limping across the line. But when you see really great stuff like that, really consistently made, you have to just take your hat off and say, you're part of something great, and you hope to think over the course of your career you'll be part of something equally as good again, but you might not. You just don't know. You have to enjoy those moments when you have them.
Yeah, I love that scratch recording. Sometimes people just help out on scratch recording when you're starting a show, and sometimes they end up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I did that myself. Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, I hate hearing my voice back though. It's like I'd rather have other people do it because it just ruins the whole experience for me. But scratch needs to be done,
Yeah.
So just back to yourself, Seamus. So just this week, Ron's Gone Wrong just released. You want to tell us a bit about that, please? That you're allowed to, of course. I know the trailer's released, so there's bits out there.
Yeah, Ron's Gone Wrong. I was working on it for almost 3 years, and it's been made in London by Locksmith Studio and D-Neg, who are a lot of ex-Aardman people actually in Locksmith. And we first feature for a studio, and weirdly it reminded me of working on Chicken Run at times, because we didn't know what we were doing, making it up as we go along, building a pipeline and all that kind of thing. But the story was always pretty good. There's like a lot of fun in there. I think it's going to be a fun movie, and that's the thing we wanted to get across, was the feeling and the emotion of a boy and his robot. And there's a lot of movies with a kid and a dog, a kid and a robot, or something like that, but there's a lot of heart in it. I mean, the trailer that dropped yesterday, there's a lot of technology, and it was very complicated to figure all that stuff out. But the heart of the movie is what you don't see in the trailer really, but it's about this bond. It's kind of about friendship versus technology, and what's important in the world when everything is kind of saturated by.
But I'm actually working on something that's thematically almost identical. It's about
there's
Our
a
human
lot
beings
of it.
relationship with technology and
Yeah.
and the positives of it, but also the drawbacks. What it doesn't make up for, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. And there's a lot of that around, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
But we started Ron's Gone Wrong, and like there's a lot of collaboration in that. There was so many meetings and talking and getting character design right and doing all the animation tests. And then suddenly we started running with it, it being greenlit. And there was a few changes and rewrites along the way, as there always is, really. And often is that you almost write too much and you have to kind of condense it down. And I could really relate to what Alan was saying earlier on, when you just feel like it's not working or there's too much of it. But
you have to kill your babies, is the saying. You have to just take out the bits, because in hindsight you don't need them. And I think great storytelling is always incredibly economical. It's like allowing the confidence of the least amount to do the most amount. It's
exactly.
like taking back all the extra, like as a writer, I would definitely overwrite. But I'm happy to go, well, that's my part of my process. And through the overwriting, I'm able to get really hit on what I need, and then you pull away. It's like working with clay. You just keep on scraping and scraping until you've actually got the thing that's
exactly. And with Ron's Gone Wrong, there's a robot in it called Ron who goes wrong, who can't do a lot of things. So he is actually quite limited. And this is something I did on Shaun the Sheep as well. We used to watch like old silent Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, where everything is all, just basic poses almost. And if you can read that and you understand what's going on without words, that's the acting, that's the feeling you want to get across. And with a robot who's sort of limited in certain things, we have to study a lot of that in this film.
You need to read your characters for having an emotional palette on the canvas.
Yeah.
So sometimes the design of a character, while it might look good, is it actually functional enough to give you the spectrum of emotions and reactions that you're going to need to tell a story?
Yes, exactly. And it's really important not to over animate a character like that, because animators want to animate. Oh, I can do this, I can do that. Yeah. We're like, no, it's got to not move. Just move the eyes. There's a moment.
I trust that less is more sometimes. Because then you can pay it off. It's like you said earlier on. It's about knowing you can have that great moment now, but is it actually more powerful if you save it and you anticipate it? Because
will you remember it more?
About anticipate, making the audience wait. One of these things that modern sort of movements with a lot of commissioners and networks is to give the audience what they want. I'm a big believer of, like, they don't know what they want, and you keep them waiting for that and keep them anticipating. An audience would want to deflate the tension if they care about the character, but what you as a filmmaker are trying to do, or a storyteller, is to try and draw that tension out and find new and interesting and surprising and inevitable ways of ratcheting up the tension.
There's room for everything, and there is a lot of focus groups and people with tele notes and try and please everybody at the same time, but there's room for not doing that as well. And obviously there was a lot of people involved in Ron's Gone Wrong with 20th Century Fox and Disney and lots of voices, but we tried to stay as clear as possible to the main crux of the story, which is basically friendship about two characters, and not to overcomplicate that as much. Anyway, we finished it this year, and it was last year really, but there was a couple of things kind of sort of spilled over. And I think it's going to be a fun film, definitely, and family friendly kind of a thing as well. But it was a hard one, and often the hardest projects I work on are the ones I'm most proud of afterwards, because we weren't quite sure what we were doing in parts of, will this work, will it not work? And you have to be brave sometimes if you feel that this is going to work, this is the feeling I want from it, and let's go with it. And we don't want to water it down or dumb it down too much, to please everybody. Let's be brave and put it out the way we feel like we should put it out. And then people will either like it or they won't. I feel that I did a good job on it. You feel like you've put your heart and soul into something, even if no one goes to watch it, that you've maybe done a good job personally.
Yeah.
And that's what the love of it for me is that I want to work on something, I want to do something, I put my heart into it. If I don't believe in it, maybe I wouldn't be as interested in
Yeah, it's
it.
very hard to sustain that level of work and kind of integrity of talent.
Mm,
Things that are, that you have to. Your best work is done when you really are obsessed with something and you're obsessed with making it the best
yeah,
version of itself that it can
yeah,
be.
exactly.
So
But
just Seamus pointed a few things there about watching the old silent films and all those reactions and stuff. So Alan, just on that note, with odd bods, the characters that don't talk, just grunt and make sounds, like how did just manage that?
That is hard. I mean, non-dialogue is really hard because ultimately, well, characters can have any number of desires. If those desires aren't simple enough to represent visually, then ultimately the story becomes confusing. So it really is a case of like picking stories that were simple enough, finding ways of representing the internal desires of a character, and then tell a story that challenges them visually, where you don't have to rely on exposition. So yeah, it's again, you learn from the best. You learn from I learned a fair amount working with Golly while I was at Arbon and developing various projects, and just real snippets of simple wisdom that make you go, oh wow, yeah, that's why that works. And again, it's Arbon had been developing this stop motion non-dialogue culture for so long that there's they're the best in the world at it. So
yeah,
you learn a lot. You
I would
stand on
just add
the
to that that thing we used to do in Ardman a lot is if there was two characters like creature comforts or something like that, yeah, the character that's reacting to who's not saying anything, and there's a character maybe talking, and there's another character in the background just sort of looking, and that's the important bit almost. And you just mentioned
same with
Golly
real
there.
live action writing. It's the saying that acting is reacting, and I think it's the
Yeah.
fact that they're listening, and then that's what the audience is looking for. They're getting the information, but they want to know what's the emotional impact of that information.
Yeah.
And that's where the real performance is, because that's where you're starting to your emotional connection to the
Oh,
characters.
you can do a lot, yeah, with hardly any words at all. Like Gromit, for instance, and he doesn't say anything, but
No,
he
but
just sort
because
of
the
looks.
performances are, this is it. He's integral. Integral. Like Steve
Yeah.
McQueen was one of the smartest actors in his day, but live action, he used to give all his lines away, and people thought he was so unbelievably generous. And I suppose in a way it was, because a lot of these supporting actors were like, they were acting on screen with one of the most famous guys in the world, and he was giving all his lines away because he knew the reaction shot was going to be on him instead, and that way of keeping yourself front and center and
Yeah.
really putting yourself into the mind's eye and the emotional sort of sphere of the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lads, listen, absolutely brilliant stuff there. I just want to ask a question about advice. So Seamus, if you were going back to Barra House there, Natai, or heading back to school in Natai, like what kind of advice would you give to students in secondary school that are maybe not aware of a career in animation, or what kind of tips would you give them?
I think we sort of touched on it earlier, but you kind of have to want to do it or love to want to do it. And when I was about 14 or 15, I knew I kind of wanted to do something in animation or film. And then it's about observing the world around you a little bit. For an animator, drawing is so important. Whether it's especially live drawing. If you can draw a dog or a cow, and I used to draw cows because there was nothing else to draw. And then when you kind of understand shape and form, then you can kind of caricature it and pull it around and make it fun. And also, there's so many platforms today like Instagram and Twitter and all these things to show off your work. Even the smallest doodle that you can do, you can put all your work up there for people to see it. And I encourage anyone to kind of be as prolific as you can in your drawing if you want to be an animator, and try and get it out there. I got a lucky break, going to Ardman that time, and sometimes that happens. And you have to work hard for a couple of years first, maybe before you get that lucky break. But keep observing, keep drawing, and putting it out there, showing as much people as you can. And obviously taking advice from anyone you can as well. What do you think it is drawing here? What do you think it is short story? And you know, don't take it as an insult if someone says, "Oh, I don't like that." Say,
Learning to
"Well,
take
what can I?"
criticism is a really important skill if you're going to grow and get
Yeah.
better. Because you know, okay, some of this criticism you mightn't agree with. It might even be kind criticism. It might even be valid, but you
Mm,
have to be open to the truth of someone else's interpretation, whether you like it or not, because
yeah.
that's the key to really unlocking how to get better, how to captivate more imaginations, or whether it's storytelling or people's eye through its images or drawing.
Yes. It often gives you
That's
more
art.
ideas as well. Somebody says, "I don't like that because,"
Mm.
you go, "Oh, okay, well, there's 3 or 4 ways I could maybe do that differently." And that'll give you more ideas, you know, for your writing or your drawing. And you have to really do it. You have to go through it and
Yeah.
recognize, okay, I've written 20 pages today and I'm only happy with one of them. But let's keep that one and start again tomorrow and
Everything
based
can be
on that.
rewritten. Everything can be improved. It's this
Yeah.
idea of like with me for writers. I would say read scripts, read.
Mm,
There's not enough writers out there who read. Get you know you'll learn how to write well that way. You'll also learn lots of bad mistakes to avoid. You know, someone else will do them for you. And I would say, yeah, it's learning to take criticism again. From the right kind of people who can actually. It becomes a point of encouragement. Yeah, I didn't do this right, or there's another way I can do this. You really pick up. You get better by assembling better ideas and better ways of thinking and seeing things. Yeah, I mean, like when I started out, I wasn't half the writer I am now, and it's through hard work and being able to swallow my pride and also sometimes swallow criticism that's made me improve. I'm always looking to improve. I don't really see myself as
yeah.
a finished product at all.
Yeah, I
So it's
think
learning.
you're always learning as well. You're always learning from your previous project, or you know, and it's always good to have a couple of ideas on the go. Some may not make it, but
Mhm.
you know, don't put all your energy into one thing. You know, always kind of try and spread it out a little bit with drawing stories and ideas. One will lead the way.
Just on that note, Alan, like how many ideas would you have, say, kicking around that were word pun 20 years ago that you like go,
I have,
aha, or you add to it, or
I
how
have
many
so
amazing
many. I have like I keep all my old phones because there's a notes section. And so that's what I haven't looked at in years. I mean, like a lot of the stuff that has kind of kept me going is because I've been approached professionally by people, with, should we say, partially, and my job is to come on board and help develop it, like Obbods, which was, and lots of other things. I've loads more of my own stuff. I hadn't really got round to finish it because I suppose you have to take what's in front of you sometimes. I'd love to be able to take 6 months off and work on my own stuff, but at the same time, I have to kind of there's
Yeah.
the professional part of you that has to keep going, and when work comes and you feel like you're riding the crest of a wave, you want to keep that momentum, you know.
lads, just from my point of view, I just say completely seriously impressed by the length of time you worked on the amount of projects and the fact you just love them. You know what I mean? Like I know animation could be a real kind of burnout culture, or you work really hard for a couple of years and a lot of people kind of drop off it. But I just absolutely love how you guys still love it and still watch it. So fair play to you for that.
We're gluttons for punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what burnout feels like too.
Yeah, no, I think we all do. But no, we're very privileged. It really is. Like it for
Yeah.
me, it's a very humbling thing because you realize, that you are working with some incredibly talented people. That is a privilege, really, because so
Yeah.
many people are required to do something. And I mean, you can't take what you do too seriously. It can't all be about you. Realize that you're one element of very, many constituent elements that all need to work in harmony together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Works, it's really satisfying experience. It really is.
So many different departments, you know, in animation anyway, from, you know, I mentioned earlier, model makers, electricians, and there's writers, art directors, you know, riggers. Everyone, you know, we do have to get around the same table or Zoom call sometimes. And it's great you just find stuff from other people. You go, wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. And they would say, oh, I really like the animated shot. And you go, it wasn't that good. But everyone kind of takes something from someone else and it inspires them. That's why it's so collaborative. And that's what I live for on a project. You know, it's when you find a nice talented group of people. You can learn so much from them, and they will learn from you as well.
Lads, just on that note, I just can't finish it any better than that. So, lads, I just want to thank you very much. So, we've covered both Clare and Laois and all the animation and Dublin as well for yourself, Alan. And lads, just
yeah.
lads, thanks very much for all the advice and support from myself and all the part. And on that note, I just want to thank very much the June Fest and Dunamays Art Centre, and of course Kildare County Council and Laois County Council for making this podcast and this series possible. And on that note, I'd say good night and see you on the next one.